Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And thank you to ADB for the opportunity to speak today. Actually, I'm going to do a slight twist on my normal COVID-19 vaccine talk. You'll see the same slides, but what I'm hoping is that we can start to extract from the mess, the wreckage that COVID-19 has left, both economically, socially, and for in terms of human misery, and begin to extract some lessons that could build things of value for global health in the future. These are my disclosures. So, we had around 300 different vaccine concepts. Some of them are still in human clinical trials, and we've had 10 vaccines that have made and presented data on efficacy and safety, and those are listed there. One of the things that we didn't know when we started this process in January of 2020 was whether we would be able to develop, test, and then approve vaccines within a 12-month window. And in fact, the fastest vaccines made it from clone to clinic, from initial work to regulatory approval for emergency use in 11 months. So that's potentially something that if we can build on, maybe we can get more critically important vaccines out more quickly. The second important thing to think about, the second opportunity here, is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, which is a non-governmental organization which is funded by many, including philanthropies and countries, to develop vaccines for outbreak diseases. And initially, CEPI had concentrated on diseases like Nipah and MERS and Lassa fever. But it was ready when COVID-19 struck. And what you see in the red arrows there are companies that were funded in January of 2020 by CEPI. So CEPI funded these companies, and these companies now have products that have been shown to be safe and efficacious. A very wise investment by the world community, and an investment that deserves to be refunded as CEPI goes into its second round of major funding opportunity. All of us are wondering when we're going to be able to be vaccinated. And, we ask this question a lot. And UNICEF has actually done some projections. And when they ask companies how much vaccine they can manufacture, the companies give us large numbers. So in the second half of 2021, 12.6 billion doses. The company projections for 2022, 30.2 billion doses. And for 2023, 31.5 billion doses. And those of us who are still waiting for vaccines to make the leap from high-income countries to low and middle-income countries are wondering, how realistic are these projections? And what you see on the purple part of this, of the bars, are the companies companies that have WHO-approved products. And you can see that the number is actually far smaller. So what do we consider to be a reasonable number of doses produced, and how and when will we know that? COVAX has been an enormously important development, and it's going to be covered on another slide. But COVAX needs vaccines, and it doesn't help if vaccines are being allocated through bilateral mechanisms. We need to engage COVAX to distribute vaccine to countries all over the world. But I think this slide makes a point that we're going to have to make billions of doses, 10 to 12 billion doses, in order to vaccinate enough people around the world to achieve herd immunity. But one of the most interesting things that has come out of this is, in the old days, Merck made Merck's vaccine. Pfizer made Pfizer's vaccine. Serum Institute made Serum Institute's vaccines. Now we actually have contracting and licensing agreements between major companies and other major companies, between major companies and developing country vaccine manufacturers to manufacture these billions of doses. And that dissemination, that distribution of manufacturing capability and technology is going to be very important, and is something that we should build on, because the world needs hundreds of millions of doses, not only of COVID vaccines, but of vaccines against HPV, against pneumococcal invasive pneumococcal disease. So maybe we can build this new network of contracting and licensing agreements into something that will provide low-cost, high-quality vaccines, not only for COVID, but for other diseases. So onto COVAX. 189 countries joined COVAX. It intends to have 2 billion doses of WHO pre-qualified vaccine by the end of 2021, which is roughly 20% of need. The most recent estimates are pushing that percentage upward to maybe 27 to 28% of need, thanks to the effectiveness of the groups, CEPI, Gavi, and the World Health Organization, that have led the COVAX facility. But we know that these doses aren't going to be enough, that over 8 billion doses are reserved mainly by high-income countries. The modeling that we have suggests that if we do not distribute the first 2 billion doses of vaccine with some nod to equity, with some attention paid to equity, that global COVID deaths will double, and that economic costs will not only be borne by low and middle income countries, but will have a dramatic effect on the high income countries as well. The National Board of Economic Review estimates $4 to $5 trillion if the advanced economies focus exclusively on vaccinating their own populations. So this is something that we have to solve together. So 2 lessons here. First, through COVAX, we actually have a mechanism now for near concurrent access to innovative vaccine technology in the same year that it's introduced into high-income countries. Let's not lose this mechanism. As new vaccines are rolled out, as old vaccines are reaching only a portion of the populations that they need to reach, let's remember that we could do it for COVID-19, and we should be able to do it for other vaccine-preventable infectious diseases as well. The other point is that we have been pretty good at vaccinating children. EPI programs vaccinate 80 to 85% of children around the world with their basic vaccination requirements, provide EPI, extended program of immunization programs, for 80 to 85% of children around the world. For COVID-19, we will have to vaccinate everybody. Those children, their brothers and sisters, their mothers and fathers, their grandparents. We are going to establish a mechanism for universal, lifetime vaccination. Vaccines are important in protecting against morbidity and mortality, not only in childhood, but in old age as well. And let's remember that as we look to things that we can extract from COVID-19, from the COVID-19 pandemic, and turn into something of real value for global health. This is a slide that I've shown frequently. It has the vaccines that have efficacy data reported for them, divided by neutralizing antibody titers. But we're not going to focus on that today. What we're going to do is instead talk about the innovation that was seen in this setting. We had never before been able to prove that an RNA vaccine, an mRNA vaccine, was safe and efficacious. So the vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna are mRNA. The beauty of mRNA is that they can be produced very quickly, and potentially vaccines against the second variant for COVID-19 should start this week or next week. And these are studies that will be initiated by the company Moderna. That technology needs to get around the world, and we need to start thinking about the other vaccine problems that might be solved with this innovative vaccine technology. Another point, and what's shown in the panel right now are the largest vaccine companies by revenue and by manufacturing volume. And what you can see, and you recognize the names, GSK, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, Pfizer, Sanofi, and you see how much their annual revenue is. Those are the little black dots on the second panel on the bottom, what their vaccine pipelines are. But I think one of the curious things about COVID-19 is, where are the major vaccine manufacturers? What you see in the next 2 things are, in blue, the companies that actually have COVID-19 vaccines. The big box at the top includes Pfizer, Sanofi, GSK, Merck, Takeda, Daiichi, and Serum Institute. Are they making their own vaccines? Actually, Pfizer's using an mRNA vaccine from a BioNTech in Germany. Sanofi, its first effort was not optimal, and so it's still catching up. Right now, it's making the RNA vaccines from BioNTech. GSK did not enter a vaccine. Merck withdrew and is now making Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. Takeda did not enter a vaccine. Daiichi Sankyo did not enter a vaccine. Serum Institute is actually making vaccines for other people. Actually, those are remarkably good things, because we know that Serum Institute can manufacture a huge volume of high quality vaccine. And let's hope the AstraZeneca and Novavax vaccines get out into global populations. When you look at the success stories, you're looking at AstraZeneca, a company that's never made a vaccine. Johnson & Johnson, which was not a major vaccine manufacturer. Actually, you can see its revenues from its vaccine program, the little black dot on the bottom box. Novavax, which is a biotech which has no licensed vaccines, what we're seeing is innovation and COVID-19 vaccines coming from not the sources that we would have thought. And that may be a good thing for global health. Finally, let's switch to other vaccines for global health. And I've just included some of them in red there: NTS, non-typhoidal salmonella, Group A strep, GAS, schistosomiasis, ETEC, Group B strep, hepatitis E, malaria, dengue, HIV, cholera, rotavirus. And what you see there is where those vaccines are stuck. They're stuck in what we traditionally call the valleys of death, the gap between the laboratory and clinical testing, and then the implementation gap between clinical development and actual use in policy. So one of those examples would be the malaria vaccine, which was shown to be have an efficacy of around 50%, but is still not in widespread use. Why? We're waiting for effectiveness trials. So again, we can significantly delay the implementation of important new technology if we're not ready with complete funding to take a vaccine to its end, which is implementation. And then there are the forgotten vaccines. You know, better utilization of the existing vaccines will save 25 million lives from 2011 to 2020. That's the Global Action Plan for vaccines. But the infectious diseases for which no vaccines exist are numerous and significant, and could account for roughly 50 million deaths in the same period of time. So while we need to work on getting those vaccines that we have now to the people who need them, we also have to work on some of the vaccines for other diseases like HIV, TB, Group A strep. And I've just given you an illustration there. This is NIH funding, US National Institutes of Health funding. And what you see on the display is the amount of NIH funding on the y-axis against the number of deaths or DALYs on the x-axis. And Group A strep, and in general, those diseases fall into a pattern. The greater the number of deaths or DALYs, the greater the amount of funding. Well, Group A strep, and I can tell you non-typhoidal salmonella, invasive non-typhoidal salmonella, is in the same position. They fall off the curve. These diseases are not being funded at all. If we look at neglected tropical disease vaccine research, 70% of that goes for HIV, TB, and malaria. Less than 1% goes to tier 3 disease candidates: invasive non-typhoidal salmonella, Shigella, Group A strep. We need to find a way to develop these vaccines. And if it means creating a new form of funding vaccines for neglected diseases, it's something that we really need to do in the next few years. So finally, the silver linings from COVID. Number one, 11 months clone to clinic. I'm not going to mention the things in red, which are the flip side. Well, what about safety? The Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations funded vaccines that proved to be efficacious, so that model worked. Vaccine manufacturers made contracting and licensing agreements to make billions of doses. Big companies worked with other big companies, something we don't see, but something we should see more frequently, as we need to get lots and lots of different vaccines, HPV, rotavirus, pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, out to millions of children around the world. COVAX provided a unique mechanism for near concurrent access to innovative vaccine technology. But now we're hearing about vaccine geopolitics, about some great game being played in parts of the world in order to win influence and make friends. Vaccines are a global public good and need to be distributed to the countries that need them in order to save lives, to decrease the morbidity and mortality that we know attends COVID-19 infection. We have to go from pediatric extended programs on immunization to lifetime universal immunization. We know that mRNA vaccines can protect against infectious diseases, but right now those mRNA vaccines are for the global haves. We need vaccine technology, including RNA technology, that can be extended to everyone in this world. And finally, are innovation, size, and partnership the key to pandemic success? And where are the big vaccine manufacturers? Are they a part of the solution? I hope so. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And because I usually talk about this, I'm going to put this slide up last as a reminder.